Weary after a grueling double shift at the hospital, her only thought was to refuel her car and finally head home. That was until two patrol vehicles cornered her. What they didn't realize was her father's background. Delta Force. Stopping wasn't even on Tamika Rollins's radar. Propelled by caffeine, sheer adrenaline, and a mother's determination, she'd just finished 2 consecutive shifts at Baldwin County Hospital. Her feet were aching, eyes strained, her mind adrift somewhere between total exhaustion and just getting through it. It was nearing 11:30 p.m. The twins were safe at home with the neighbor, and she desperately needed to reach her small house on West Elm before midnight. But the gas light glowed a persistent orange. She steered her silver Toyota Camry into an aged Shell station just outside Milledgeville, Georgia. It was the kind of place that felt half abandoned, dim, flickering lights overhead, a dusty snack section hidden behind thick bulletproof glass. She pulled up to pump number 4, leaving the engine running, unwilling to risk her car refusing to restart. Her hospital scrubs remained wrinkled from the ICU. Tamika reached for her card, glanced around and sighed. Suddenly, blinding headlights flooded her rearview mirror. A Baldwin County Sheriff's SUV swerved in behind her, moving fast. She narrowed her eyes. Another vehicle parked diagonally across the lot, positioning itself as if to block her exit. 2 officers emerged. Young men, perhaps in their mid-30s, their hands already resting on their utility belts. Tamika's gut tightened, but she kept her hands visible and remained still. "Ma'am," the first officer said, approaching with a flashlight beam directed at her. "Can I see your license and registration?" Tamika blinked. "Is there a problem, officer? We received a call regarding a suspicious vehicle matching this description. We need to verify it's not stolen." Her voice remained steady. "I just finished work. I'm a nurse at Baldwin County General. My ID is still on me." She slowly indicated her hospital badge clipped to her top. Her fingers trembled slightly. The officer didn't even look at it. "Registration and ID now." She reached for her wallet on the passenger seat, moving slowly, deliberately. Her heart pounded fiercely against her ribs. She had followed every rule, hands visible, voice clear, no sudden movements. Yet there was a practiced edge in their tone. "What's your business here?" The second officer chimed in, circling around toward the passenger side. "Gas station closes in 10 minutes. I needed gas. My tank is empty." "You live nearby?" "Yes." He leaned closer, his eyes flicking toward the back seat where a child's car seat sat covered by a small fleece blanket. "You have someone with you?" "No. Just me." A pause, then the first officer stated, "Pop the trunk." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Excuse me." "Pop the trunk." She looked at him, puzzled. "On what grounds?" The officer took a step forward, his voice hardening. "Ma'am, this is a routine request. If you don't comply, we may have to escalate." Tamika swallowed, feeling her heart press against her ribs. Not tonight. Not after the demanding shifts, not with her children waiting. "I'm calling my father," she said quietly. "Ma'am, we are giving you a lawful order." She raised one hand slowly. "I am calling my father right now." There was a quiet certainty in her delivery, not loud or defiant, just resolute. Turning away slightly, keeping one hand raised, she dialed the number etched in her memory. He answered on the first ring. "Tamika." Her throat tightened. "Daddy, I need you to come to the Shell station off Highway 22 right now." A pause, then 3 simple words. "I'm on my way." She ended the call. The officers exchanged glances. "What was that?" one asked. She didn't reply. They wouldn't appreciate who was coming, but they had no conception of how badly they had misjudged her. The night air felt heavy with silence. Tamika remained still, phone in one hand, her heart in the other. The officers didn't back down. If anything, they closed in, scrutinizing her now that she dared to make a call. She wasn't shouting or crying. That seemed to unsettle them more than anything else. "You don't want to complicate this unnecessarily," the officer with the square jaw stated. His nameplate read Hobson. The other, quieter but observing her every move, was Deputy Fielda. Fielda appeared younger, less certain, but he wasn't interfering with Hobson, just watching the scene unfold. "I am standing here doing nothing wrong," Tamika said. "You requested ID, I provided it. You asked where I reside, I told you. Why are you continuing to pressure me?" "We're not pressuring you," Hobson retorted, his voice clipped. We're performing our duty. Your duty doesn't involve treating people like criminals without justification. Hobson stepped even closer, his hand brushing against his holster. Not drawing, not unholstering, just a reminder. You have an issue with law enforcement? Tamika let out a breath. No. I have an issue with being treated as if I'm guilty merely for existing. That's when he offered a slight smirk, a subtle twitch at the corner of his mouth, as if she'd just confirmed his assumption. Keep pushing, he said, and we'll have to bring you in. Loitering. Interfering with an investigation. Investigation of what? She asked, her voice now sharper. I stopped for gasoline. That is all. No one reported me. You are fabricating this out of nothing. Fielda finally interjected, his tone less rigid. We received a vague report about a silver vehicle in this vicinity. It could be a simple mistake. Tamika turned to him, her eyes narrowing. So let me comprehend this. You pulled in behind me with backup based on a vague report? He offered no response. I am a nurse. I just completed a 14-hour shift saving lives. I have 2 children awaiting me at home, and I am standing here being treated as if I robbed this establishment. Silence stretched again, thick and uncomfortable. It was then that the clerk inside emerged. A young man, perhaps 19, tall and slender, wearing a bright orange hoodie stained with grease. Hey, officers, he said, striving to keep his voice neutral. She's only been here a couple minutes. Not causing any trouble. Cameras recorded everything if you require it. Hobson shot him a harsh glare. Stay inside, son. This doesn't involve you. The kid glanced at Tamika, then back at the deputies. Kinda does. She's just getting gas. Get inside. He retreated, muttering under his breath. Tamika looked at the pump, still not activated. Her hands were shaking too much to input her PIN. She looked back at Hobson. I am not afraid of you. He chuckled. You should be. But even as he said it, her stillness seemed to introduce a flicker of unease in him. In the distance, tires crunched on gravel. A vehicle turned off the highway and glided into the lot. A black SUV, its windows deeply tinted. It halted in the space next to her car as if it belonged there, which in fact it did. The driver's door opened. Out stepped a man about 6'3", solidly built, with stone-gray, close-cropped hair and eyes that were fixed, not wandering. His skin was dark and weathered. He moved with the quiet assurance of someone who didn't need to announce himself or seek permission. Tamika, he said. Daddy. She exhaled, her shoulders dropping an inch. Not in relaxation but bracing. Colonel Darius Rollins did not immediately look at the officers. He looked at his daughter, assessing her face, her posture, her hands. Then slowly and deliberately he turned his head toward Hobson and Fielda. Problem here, gentlemen? He inquired, but neither seemed prepared to answer. Colonel Darius Rollins did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. There was something about him, how he stood, how his eyes locked onto Hobson's without wavering, that shifted the very energy of the parking lot. It was the kind of presence not acquired in a classroom or during patrol. It was forged by years of commanding soldiers in places the average person couldn't even pronounce, places where a mistake meant someone didn't return home. He stepped between his daughter and the officers, a natural instinct. Hobson adjusted his stance. Sir, this is a police matter. We are conducting an investigation. Darius tilted his head slightly. An investigation, he repeated, his voice even, of a nurse in scrubs at a gas pump? Do you possess body camera footage of that? Fielda shifted uncomfortably. Hobson stiffened. We were following protocol. We received a report. Darius cut him off, his voice low but undeniably firm. Do you have a license plate match, a make, a model? Anything beyond a black woman in a silver car? Silence. He didn't wait for an answer. Allow me to tell you what I observe, Darius continued, now pacing just slightly, his hands clasped behind his back. I see a woman alone, exhausted, still in her uniform after saving lives. And I see 2 men utilizing the authority of their badge to bully someone who has done absolutely nothing wrong. Hobson took a step forward. I don't appreciate. You do not need to appreciate anything, Darius stated, his eyes fixed. You need to consider very carefully where you are and to whom you are speaking. For a moment it appeared Hobson might push back. His mouth opened then closed. Something in Darius's tone, the quiet certainty, landed like a warning. The gas station clerk had reappeared outside, phone in hand, now recording. A couple in a pickup truck across the lot was watching too, their window rolled halfway down. Even the late-night breeze seemed to pause. Tamika finally moved. She reached for the gas nozzle and began pumping. No one stopped her this time. Darius looked at Fielda. "You're the backup?" Fielda gave a short nod. "Yes, sir." "Do you have children?" "Sir." "2 boys." "Would you wish someone doing this to their mother?" Fielda did not reply. "I didn't think so." Darius turned to Hobson again, this time holding his gaze longer. "You don't know who I am, do you?" "I don't care who you are," Hobson snapped, attempting to reclaim control. "Wrong move." Darius took a deliberate step forward. "Colonel Darius Rollins. 32 years United States Army. Last 10 with the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. People don't say no to me. They say sir." Hobson's jaw tightened but his hand dropped from his belt. "And right now, sir," Darius added, "you are going to permit my daughter to finish obtaining gasoline, and then you are going to depart. You are not going to follow her, you are not going to harass her, you are not going to fabricate some backdated charge to justify your ego." He paused. "Because if you do, I make one phone call and your badge, your pension, and whatever power you believe you possess will vanish before breakfast." Fielda took a half step back. Hobson remained stationary. Tamika finished at the pump, returned the nozzle and closed the fuel door. She looked at her father. "We're good." He didn't avert his eyes from the officers. "We're good." She walked slowly to the driver's seat, opened the door and got in. The engine was still running. Darius didn't move until she was securely inside. Then, as if finally dismissing a nuisance, he turned from Hobson and walked toward his SUV. But what transpired next would resonate with those officers long after they left the parking lot. The SUV hadn't even cleared the lot before the gas station clerk stepped outside again, this time holding up his phone. "I have the entire thing," he announced. "From the moment she arrived." Fielda blinked. "What do you mean?" "Security cameras plus my phone. I saw what happened." He looked at Hobson now, the fear gone from his face. "You came at her for nothing." Hobson attempted to reassert control. "You're interfering with law enforcement." "Nope," the kid replied. "Just keeping folks honest." Inside the store, the elderly man who worked the counter most nights, Mr. Burton, was already accessing the security footage. The cameras covered the pumps, the sidewalk, even provided a decent view of the officer's SUV. When he saw Tamika standing still, being questioned without apparent cause, the old man muttered under his breath, "This isn't going to look favorable." Darius hadn't gone far. He'd parked across the street, observing from behind tinted glass. Not stalking, just staying close enough in case they attempted anything after he departed. Years in the military had instilled in him the principle of never assuming a job was done simply because the immediate situation had calmed. People often waited until they believed no one was watching. Inside the store, Mr. Burton picked up his phone. "Mayor Klein," he said. "You're going to want to witness something." Back in the Camry, Tamika hadn't spoken yet. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, though the car remained in park. Darius walked back across the road, more slowly this time, tapping gently on her window. She rolled it down. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice flat. "Just angry." He leaned his arm on the roof of the car. "You handled yourself with remarkable composure." "They always regard me as though I'm being dishonest," she said finally, turning to face him. "As if being black and weary in public constitutes some form of threat." He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "You didn't buckle. You didn't weep. You remained standing." "But I shouldn't have to." "No," he agreed softly. "You should not." She looked at him. "Were you always like that? Calm, I mean." He smiled faintly. "Not always. But I learned. The loudest individual in the room typically possesses the least power. Silence can be its own weapon." She nodded slowly. "I need to become more like that." He shook his head. "No. You need to be you. But you don't have to confront every conflict alone." Just then another car entered the lot. A sleek black sedan with tinted windows and city tags. A man in a navy suit stepped out, clipboard in hand. He moved swiftly toward Mr. Burton inside the store. Mayor Clive Klein had secured re-election twice. A small town limited scandals. But he understood the repercussions when officers made negative headlines. He reviewed the footage twice, then requested the clerk email it to the city server. No words, just a firm nod. Outside, Fielder re-entered his cruiser. Hobson lingered, chewing his cheek, then followed. Darius stepped back as Tamika began to pull out. "Heading home?" he asked. "Yeah. I'll follow you." She didn't object. They drove off, one behind the other, slow, calm. But this was far from over. Inside the mayor's office the following morning, 3 names lay on his desk: 2 deputies and a gas station clerk. One with a formal complaint, one with a history of pushing boundaries, one with a phone full of evidence. But before the day concluded, word had circulated that matters would not be dismissed this time. By 9, Baldwin County was abuzz, and not in a good way. Phones rang, emails pinged. A segment from the gas station encounter had already surfaced in local Facebook groups. Merely 2 minutes long, filmed unsteadily from the clerk's phone, but sufficiently clear to reveal everything. A tired nurse in scrubs, 2 officers pressing her without cause, then the black SUV, then the man who altered the entire dynamic with nothing more than a voice and a gaze. By noon, the county sheriff's office had issued a brief statement. "The incident at the Shell station is currently under internal review. Both deputies involved have been placed on temporary administrative leave pending investigation." But the town was already discussing it. Down at Bishop's Diner, Miss Linda was cleaning the counter when she heard the news. "Tamika Rollins? That's Shirley's girl, isn't it? Always polite, that one. Works at Baldwin County General." Tamika clocked in as usual. Some colleagues offered longer glances than normal. One nurse leaned in and whispered, "Saw the video. You handled that like a boss." Tamika simply nodded and continued. There were patients to assist, IVs to check. No time to fully process the storm she had just endured. Meanwhile, Darius Rollins was not idle. He wasn't the type to cause public uproar, but he understood how to initiate phone calls that navigated quietly through the appropriate channels: generals, former colonels, contacts in D.C. People who didn't inquire about his well-being. They asked who needed to be addressed. Yet something troubled him more than the events at the station. It was what Tamika hadn't expressed. The composure she wore like armor, the slight tremor in her hands. Not from fear but exhaustion. He recalled when she was small, waiting on the front porch for him to return from deployment, her tiny braids bouncing as she ran to him. She never asked about his time overseas, never questioned the missed moments. She simply hugged him as if he were still 10 feet tall. And now she was the one standing tall in a parking lot under duress, alone until he arrived. Later that evening he visited her home. She resided in a modest single-story house near Lake Sinclair, unpretentious, but clean and secure. The twins were on the living room floor constructing a Lego fortress. Tamika was in the kitchen stirring a pot of chicken soup. "Smells like something real," Darius said as he entered. She smirked. "Have you eaten yet? Always make room for yours." They sat at the small kitchen table, steam rising between them. Silence for a while. Then Tamika asked, "Do you believe they will genuinely take action this time?" Darius tilted his head. "They already began. That video, it circulated widely. You are no longer just a nurse. You are a face in a narrative that won't simply fade away." "I don't desire to be a face," she said. "I merely want to raise my children and not be followed at gas stations." "I understand," he replied. "But sometimes these stories find us regardless of our wishes." She stirred her soup slowly. "I just kept thinking, what if the boys had been with me?" Darius leaned forward. Then they would have witnessed how a strong woman handles pressure and how a father provides support. She didn't speak further after that, just reached for his hand, squeezed it once, then released it. Across town at the sheriff's office, Fielda sat in a meeting room, quietly watching the video again on a city-issued laptop. Hobson sat across from him, face flushed, arms crossed. The internal affairs officer took notes silently in the background. Someone mentioned the mayor had contacted the state attorney general's office. Things were progressing now rapidly. But the most significant shift was occurring within the hearts of those who had seen the video and grasped that silence was no longer an option. By the 3rd day, it wasn't confined to local news. Regional outlets picked up the story. The headline was concise, direct. "Hospital nurse questioned without cause. Father's presence alters entire encounter." Photos of Tamika in her scrubs, framed beside a still image of her father at the gas station, circulated online. News vans appeared outside Baldwin County General. A reporter attempted to approach her in the parking lot. She said nothing, simply walked inside and clocked in. Tamika wasn't seeking fame or commendation. She wanted her sons to grow up safe. She wanted to continue her work, assisting people who arrived in the ER frightened and in pain. But for the first time in years, people were calling her name for a reason other than a patient's room number. At home, her inbox filled with messages from strangers, nurses in other states, single mothers, military families, young women who wrote, "I saw you. I've been there too." It was overwhelming. She printed one message and taped it to the refrigerator. Just one. "You stood your ground, and it reminded me not to shrink in the face of wrongdoing." Meanwhile, Sheriff Bruner, who had remained silent throughout the ordeal, finally issued a public statement. He did not evade or deflect. At a town hall meeting, he stood before a packed room at the Milledgeville Civic Center and declared, "This department failed someone. We are implementing measures to ensure this does not recur." He looked at the audience for a long moment, then added, "And to Ms. Rollins and her family, I offer my apology." Darius didn't applaud or nod, but he observed from the rear of the room, arms crossed, not with suspicion, but with measured comprehension. He understood that genuine accountability wasn't about speeches. It was about follow-through. And to Sheriff Bruner's credit, changes did begin. Mandatory body camera training was enforced. Officers were required to complete de-escalation sessions, not just once but quarterly. Hobson was suspended without pay pending the review's completion. Fielda voluntarily stepped back, requesting reassignment to community outreach. But none of that undone what transpired that Saturday night. Darius took the twins fishing near Cars Station Road, Old Cane Poles, a packed lunch, a tranquil lake. The boys laughed, posed questions, attempted to sneak cookies before lunch. He didn't discuss the gas station or the news. He simply watched them, listened to their laughter, protected their peace. Back at Tamika's house, she sat on the porch steps watching the sunset, alone. A neighbor approached, carrying a plate of banana bread. "I just wanted to say," the woman hesitated, then handed over the plate. "What you did, what you endured, it was wrong. I'm sorry." Tamika accepted the plate, surprised. "Thank you." The woman didn't linger, simply turned back and waved. Moments like those, small, quiet, honest, held more significance than any headline. Later that evening, Darius sat across from Tamika again, soft jazz playing softly in the background. "You know," he said, "what happened might fade from the news, but those boys will remember." Tamika looked at him, tired but steady. "Yeah. That's what concerns me." "Don't let it," he advised. "Let it shape them, not into individuals who fear the world, but into individuals who stand within it unflinchingly." She didn't speak immediately, just leaned her head back and allowed the silence to envelop them. Because this wasn't about going viral. It wasn't about retribution or punishment. It was about speaking truth without shouting, about holding your position when no one supports you until eventually someone does. But before the narrative concluded, Tamika had one more thought she needed to articulate. Sunday arrived, quiet. No calls, no reporters, no new footage circulating. Just stillness. Tamika stood at her kitchen sink, washing a single coffee mug. Outside the window, her sons were in the yard, laughing as they took turns leaping off a tree stump, pretending it was a spaceship launch pad. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of moment she fought daily to safeguard. Darius sat on the porch, polishing an old pair of boots that appeared to have seen deserts, jungles, perhaps more. He wasn't speaking much. He rarely did when things were finally calm. Tamika dried her hands and walked outside. "Did you ever contemplate why I never enlisted?" she asked, leaning against the porch railing beside him. He looked up, curious. "I assumed you simply didn't wish to." "I didn't," she affirmed. "But not because I feared it. I observed the type of man it molded you into, strong, respected, always evaluating every aspect of a situation." He waited. "But I desired to embody the kind of strength that heals. The kind that looks someone directly in the eye and tells them it will be painful but they will endure. That is why I chose nursing." Darius nodded slowly. "You selected a different battleground. I just didn't anticipate the conflict following me to a gas station." He remained silent. She sighed. "I dislike the notion that the boys will witness the world as it truly is. They will, he stated. But they will also observe how their mother stood tall, how she never fractured, never apologized for simply existing. Tamika looked out at her sons again. I simply wish for them to grow up understanding that it is acceptable to seek assistance, that it isn't a sign of weakness, that strength doesn't equate to silence. Darius nodded again. That is a lesson even adult men forget. The porch creaked slightly as she shifted her weight. You know what truly resonated with me, though? What's that? When I called you, you didn't ask what had occurred. You just said you were coming. He looked over at her, his eyes steady. That's all you required to hear. Tamika smiled faintly. Yeah. It was. Later that evening, she sat at her kitchen table after putting the boys to bed, a notepad before her, pen in hand. She wasn't much of a writer, but tonight she had something to articulate. She wrote to the women who are weary but still standing. To the men who have carried excessive burdens without complaint. To the parents who impart strength without bitterness. To the daughters who hold their breath every time they see flashing lights in their rearview mirror. I see you. It doesn't always demand shouting to be heard. Sometimes, merely being still and unwavering is sufficiently loud. And if no one has arrived for you yet, call them. The right individuals will appear. Even if they arrive quietly. She folded the note and attached it to the refrigerator beneath the same magnet that held the message from the stranger. Two facets of the same voice. When Monday arrived, the news cycle had moved on. But in Baldwin County, the story persisted, not as a scandal but as a catalyst for change. The clerk retained his employment. The sheriff kept his promise. And the Rollins name carried newfound significance. Tamika never sought attention. She simply desired fairness. She didn't demand the world transform overnight. She demanded it begin with one evening, one woman, one truth. And it did. Because genuine change doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives in a dusty parking lot, conveyed in a black SUV, with a voice that simply states, I'm here. So if this story resonated with you even slightly, share it. Speak it. Remember it. Because someone else might be standing at pump number 4 right now wondering if they are alone. And your voice might be the one that makes the difference. Subscribe for more stories that matter. Stories that remind us we are not invisible. We are seen. We are strong. And we are still standing.